There are valleys that hold sound, and there are valleys that swallow it. Isdal, Ice Valley, just outside Bergen, Norway, is the second kind. Steep slopes, rocky outcrops, dark trees that close in quickly when the light fades. Locals had another name for it, Death Valley. Not because of one single event, but because accidents had happened there before. Climbers had fallen, hikers had lost their footing. The terrain does not forgive distraction. Welcome back to the Eclectic, the place where history, mystery, and the unexplained collide. Each episode, we explore stories that resist easy answers, cases where the facts exist, but the truth still hides somewhere in the gaps between them. Sometimes those stories involve crime, sometimes they involve folklore, and sometimes they centre on something even stranger, a life that seems to have existed almost entirely outside the record. Tonight's story begins in Norway in the winter of 1970. In a remote valley outside the city of Bergen, hikers discovered the burned body of a woman. She carried no identification, her clothing labels had been removed, her luggage contained wigs, multiple currencies, and a notebook written in a strange shorthand. Over the weeks that followed, investigators traced her movements across hotels and cities throughout Europe under a series of different names. But the deeper they looked, the more the trail seemed to dissolve. No confirmed family, no verified identity, and no clear explanation for how she died. More than half a century later, she remains known only by the place where she was found, the Isdal Woman. Tonight, we explore the evidence, the theories, and the strange life of a woman who seemed determined to leave the world without a trace. The woman lay on her back among stones and sparse brush. Her front was severely burned, her face was unrecognisable. Her arms were positioned in a strange, almost deliberate posture. Nearby, a makeshift campfire had been set. Around her were objects placed carefully, not scattered. An umbrella, rubber boots, jewellery, fragments of clothing. This was not the aftermath of a wild forest fire. It looked staged, controlled, intentional. Police were called. What they would uncover over the next weeks would turn this from a tragic death into one of Scandinavia's most enduring mysteries, because the woman had no name, and everything about her seemed designed to keep it that way. The forensic examination was thorough for 1970. Despite the damage from burning, investigators were able to establish critical details. Soot was found in her lungs, indicating that she had been alive as she burned. Her stomach contained between 50 and 70 phenomal tablets, a barbiturate sleeping pill, but the pills were not fully absorbed. She had no signs of chronic illness, no evidence of pregnancy or childbirth, no obvious surgical scars that could identify her. Her neck was bruised, possibly from a fall or blow. In simple terms, on paper, this could be suicide. But the scene resisted simplicity, because suicides do not usually remove every trace of who they are. In her pocket, police found a key. Ordinary, metal, unremarkable, except that it unlocked 2 suitcases stored at Bergen railway station. This was the first break, the first thread. Inside the suitcases, investigators found the beginnings of a different story. The contents were meticulous. Clothing, but every label had been removed. Wigs, multiple, carefully styled. Cosmetics of high quality. Currencies from several countries. Prescription-free glasses. There was no passport, no driver's license, no letters, and no photographs. Not a single identifying document. Whoever she was, she had erased herself deliberately, or someone had done it for her. Among the items was a small notepad. It contained what looked like coded entries, short combinations of numbers and letters. At first glance, it appeared cryptic, possibly espionage, or possibly something far more mundane. But in 1970, at the height of the Cold War, the possibility of espionage was not paranoia. The key in the notebook led police to hotel records across Norway and Europe. What they found was astonishing. The woman had used at least 8 different identities, different names, different dates of birth, and all different occupations. Yet she consistently claimed Belgian nationality. She wrote in German or French. Hotel staff described her as well-dressed, elegant, but reserved. She paid mostly in cash. She sometimes changed rooms unexpectedly. She avoided unnecessary conversation, but she did not hide completely. She moved openly, but under false names. The notebook entries, once decoded, revealed something unexpected. They were not encrypted intelligence messages. They were an abbreviated travel-log. Dates and place initials. 10M, 23N. These revealed day plus month initial, and the city initials corresponding to the hotel stays. So, for example, 022 to 028P was October the 22nd to October the 28th, and the P stood for Paris. It was not a cipher hiding secrets, as you can see. It was a compressed itinerary. To understand why the case took on espionage overtones so quickly, we need to remember the time. It was 1970. Norway was a NATO member bordering the Soviet Union. The North Atlantic was strategically vital. Cell testing and military exercises were common along parts of the Norwegian coast. Intelligence activity in Europe was constant. It was subtle, quiet, and persistent. The Isdal Woman's travel pattern included Norwegian cities near military installations. She moved in zigzags. She changed names. She removed labels. She carried wigs. To investigators at the time, that constellation of details felt familiar. The Norwegian criminal police involved the security service, then known as POT. Her fingerprints and photographs were circulated internationally. Interpol issued notices. No match came back. No foreign service claimed her. No missing persons report aligned. It was as if she had stepped into existence only months before her death. Several witnesses would later describe seeing her with a well-dressed man in Bergen and other cities. She was not alone in life, but those men never identified themselves. One teenage witness, years later, recounted something stranger. He claimed he had encountered her on a hiking trail in the mountains. She appeared frightened. Behind her at some distance, 2 men followed. The men did not speak to him, they did not approach, but they were present. No official record proves this account conclusively, but it entered the narrative, and in a case built from fragments, even partial testimony carries weight. The fire itself, it remains troubling. If it was suicide, why burn the body so extensively? If erasure, why leave items nearby? If murder, why such theatrical staging? The objects were not scattered chaotically. They were placed, arranged, as though someone wanted them seen, or wanted the scene interpreted a certain way. There were no dental records matching her, no fingerprint database match in the 1970s, no employer stepping forward, no family searching publicly. This absence is perhaps the most haunting element. A middle-aged woman, travelling widely across Europe, leaves traces, work history, family, school records, something. But she left none that authorities could connect. This is not impossible, but it is unusual. And this is where mystery begins. Almost immediately, theories started flying around. Was she a spy? Was it suicide? A criminal associate? Was she a sex worker? Was it an accident? Each theory uses the same facts, but each arranges them differently. Aliases can mean tradecraft or privacy. Wigs can mean disguise or aesthetic preference. Cash payments can mean covert work or simple distrust of banks. The notepad can mean coded communication or personal shorthand. The fire can mean elimination or desperation. The same pieces build different pictures. And without a confirmed identity, no narrative anchors firmly. Decades later, the body was exhumed. Advances in forensic science offered new tools. Stable isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she was likely born around 1930. The chemical signatures pointed toward Central or Western Europe, often modelled near Nuremberg, or along the France-Germany border region. She likely spent part of her youth in French-speaking areas. DNA testing identified mitochondrial haplogroup H24. Maternal ancestry connected broadly to southeastern Europe or southwest Asia, but overall European descent. An extended DNA profile was created, yet no confirmed name emerged. Norwegian authorities retained control of the genetic data. It has not been released to public genealogy databases, and no official familial match has been announced as of early 2026. Despite podcasts, despite documentaries, and despite crowdsourced efforts, she remains unidentified. The Isdal Woman is not just unsolved, it is unresolved, because the evidence does not point decisively. It spreads outward. Every clue branches. Every theory fits partially, but no theory fits completely. She was educated enough to travel comfortably. She navigated hotels competently. She spoke multiple languages. She curated her appearance. She erased herself systematically. And then she died in a valley called Death Valley. That convergence feels intentional, even if it wasn't. The Isdal Woman is often described as mysterious, but mystery implies hidden truth. Perhaps what makes this case linger is something else. Absence? No name, no family, no certainty, only fragments. And fragments are dangerous because they allow us to build whatever narrative fits our fears. Was she hunted? Was she hiding? Was she ending her life deliberately? Was she living a life we do not easily categorize? We know how she died. We do not know why. And until we know who she was, every theory floats, untethered. The valley has kept her secret for more than half a century, and she remains the woman without a name. When a case lacks full information, people begin to imagine all sorts of theories. Without a name, there is no biography. Without a biography, there is no anchor. And when there is no anchor, the same facts can be arranged into entirely different stories. The Isdal Woman left behind evidence. What she did not leave behind was context. Let's look at the same details, slowly, and see how they shift depending on the lens. The spy theory is the most cinematic explanation. Cold War, multiple aliases, travel across borders, wigs, cash, a coded notebook, meetings with unidentified men. It feels like espionage. She used at least 8 names. Each hotel registration included a different combination of identity details. Birth dates changed, occupations shifted. Addresses were plausible, but found to be false. This wasn't just one lie, it was systematic lying. Her travel patterns zigzagged through Norway and parts of Europe. Some of the Norwegian locations were not far from military activity, missile testing areas, or NATO infrastructure. Her notebook contained coded date and place abbreviations. Nothing complex, but deliberately obscured. Her clothing labels were cut out. Wigs were in her suitcase, and she always used cash rather than cards. She left no official paper trail. For many, this constellation forms a picture: an intelligence operative working undercover, possibly gathering information, possibly acting as a courier, possibly operating between East and West in a tense geopolitical landscape. Her death in a remote valley, the burning, the ambiguity, these elements allow room for darker speculation. An eliminated asset, a failed extraction, a silenced operative. But there are problems. The notebook was not a cipher transmitting secrets. It was a compressed travel log. Professional intelligence communication typically uses more secure methods. There are no declassified intelligence files tying her to any agency, no intercepted communications, no known operation that collapsed in Bergen in the late 1970s. And no state has ever quietly acknowledged her. The spy theory is plausible in tone, but unproven in fact. The suicide theory. Strip away the Cold War lens. Look only at the autopsy. She ingested between 50 to 70 phenomyl tablets. That's a high dose. She inhaled smoke. Carbon monoxide poisoning was recorded. If you look at it in this combination, it could easily fit a planned suicide attempt. The valley was remote, quiet, private, a place where she could die undisturbed. The burning may have been intended to ensure death, or to obscure identity, or both. The removal of her clothing labels and personal documents can be read differently here. Not operational security, but perhaps intentional disappearance. Perhaps she did not want to be found by family. Perhaps she had severed ties long ago. Perhaps she was escaping something internal rather than external. The aliases could reflect someone rebuilding herself repeatedly, rewriting identity, living fragmented. Her secrecy could reflect anxiety, paranoia, and even trauma. Her room changes could reflect discomfort rather than paranoia. The men seen with her could have been companions, acquaintances, business contacts, not handlers. The pills were real. The smoke was real. The location was chosen. There is a coherence to suicide, but there are complications. Why such careful identity removal over months? Why travel so widely if planning to end your life? Why arrange objects around the body? Why partially burn but not fully destroy the remains? Suicide explains much, but not everything. The criminal milieu theory. Another interpretation removes both espionage and despair. It frames her as operating in grey or black markets. Aliases are common in smuggling networks. Cash is common in illicit trade. Travel across borders is expected. Wigs and clothing variation can support discreet meetings. She carried multiple currencies. She met unidentified men and she moved frequently. This could suggest courier work, contraband, fraud, illegal trade. If a deal went wrong, her death could have been staged to resemble suicide, an overdose forced, a fire lit to destroy evidence, the valley chosen for isolation. But again, the evidence does not prove violence beyond the pills and the smoke. There were no clear defensive injuries recorded, no obvious trauma suggesting assault, no definitive forensic indicator of homicide. The theory remains plausible, but speculative. The sex work/companion theory. Her appearance was consistently described as elegant, well kept, stylish but conservative. She frequented business hubs and tourist cities. She met well-dressed men. She used aliases. She kept her private life separated. These details align with high-end international escort work or companionship services. Such work often involves cash transactions, discretion, pseudonyms, frequent travel, separation between personal and professional identity. Wigs could provide variation. Labels removed could reduce traceability. The lack of official employment records might reflect informal income. The risk of violence in such networks is real. If something went wrong, suicide under pressure or coercion cannot be ruled out. But again, no direct evidence confirms this lifestyle. It is interpretive, not documented. The private, secretive individual. There is another possibility, less dramatic, less cinematic, but perhaps more human. She may have been simply private, intensely so. Perhaps she fled a past, political, familial, personal. Perhaps she constructed layers of identity to prevent being traced, not because she was an agent or a criminal, but because she did not want to be found. Europe in the mid-20th century was full of displaced lives. War trauma, border shifts, destroyed records, family ruptures. Rebuilding identity was not uncommon. Her coded notebook may reflect personal organisation. Her travel may reflect restlessness. Her solitude may reflect habit. Her death may reflect despair. This theory lacks glamour, but it fits quietly, and quiet explanations often lose to dramatic ones. No matter which theory one prefers, the fire remains unsettling. She was alive when it began. Smoke in her lungs proves that. Was she conscious? Perhaps partially. Was she already heavily sedated? Likely. The objects placed nearby complicate interpretation. If suicide, perhaps she arranged them before ingesting the pills. If homicide, perhaps someone staged the scene. If accident, perhaps something went wrong during an attempt to intensify carbon monoxide exposure. The burning disfigured her face severely. That detail alone prolongs mystery, because facial recognition would have accelerated identification dramatically in 1970. Burning delayed that, whether by her own intention or someone else's. The notebook once inspired Talker cryptography, but its system is simple. Dates plus month initials, city initials matching hotel records, an abbreviation cipher, not espionage communication, just compressed memory. Yet the act of encoding something mundane can feel suspicious. Why not write Bergen, 15th of November? Why reduce it? Perhaps because even ordinary information felt too revealing to write plainly. Perhaps she expected someone to see it. Perhaps she valued privacy at a level most people do not. The notebook does not confirm espionage, but it confirms deliberate obscurity. The men who never came forward. Several witnesses described her in the company of men, well-dressed, polite, reserved. None ever identified themselves publicly. In espionage narratives, these become handlers. In criminal narratives, accomplices. In escort narratives, clients. In private life narratives, acquaintances. Without names, they are shadows, and shadows are easily repurposed. Why no theory dominates? Each explanation accounts for some facts. None account for all. The spy theory explains the aliases. The suicide theory explains the pills. The criminal theory explains the cash. The escort theory explains the travel and men. The private life theory explains the erasure. But none dissolve the others completely. And that is why the case endures. It refuses to settle. When people hear about the Isdal Woman, they often ask, what do you think she was? But perhaps that is the wrong question. The better question is, what does each theory say about how we interpret women who move alone, change identities, and refuse to be easily categorized? The same evidence can make her a spy, or a criminal, or a victim, or simply a private person who wished to remain private. Until we know her name, we are arranging fragments, and fragments can be shaped into almost anything. What remains is this. She travelled deliberately, she erased herself carefully, and she died in a valley that still keeps its silence. More than 40 years after the woman was found in Isdal, the investigation took an unusual turn. Her body was exhumed. Science had advanced enormously since 1970. Techniques that did not exist at the time of the original investigation could now extract information from bone, teeth, and preserved tissue. The hope was simple. If the woman could not be identified through documents, perhaps her biology could speak for her. Teeth, in particular, are powerful historical records. They contain chemical signatures reflecting where a person grew up, what water they drank, and the environmental composition of the region where their childhood took place. Isotope analysis can sometimes narrow a birthplace to a particular geographic corridor. And so, scientists began reading the silent evidence she carried inside her body. The results did not produce a name, but they produced a map. Isotope signatures from her teeth suggested she was likely born around 1930. During childhood or adolescence, she appears to have lived in a French-speaking area, possibly Belgium, possibly France, possibly a border region where languages overlapped. This detail aligns with witness reports from hotel staff who said she wrote registration forms in German or French and claimed Belgian nationality. Isotope science does not produce exact addresses. It produces probability. It draws circles on maps, not pins. So the picture sharpened, but it did not resolve. DNA testing provided another layer. Investigators obtained mitochondrial DNA from preserved tissue. Her haplogroup was identified as H24, Europe, but also appears in parts of southeastern Europe and Western Asia. In practical terms, it confirmed she was of European ancestry. But mitochondrial DNA tracks only the maternal line, and without a known relative to compare against it, it does not produce identity. More advanced DNA profiling created an extended genetic profile. Modern genealogical methods, the kind that have solved cases like the Golden State Killer, rely on uploading profiles to large public databases and searching for distant relatives. But the Norwegian authorities have retained control of the profile. They did not release it to open genealogy platforms. As a result, the investigation has relied primarily on law enforcement databases and international cooperation. Interpol notices were circulated. European police DNA registries were checked. No match emerged. The technology exists. The connection has not yet appeared. The mystery gained renewed attention when journalists and researchers began revisiting the case. One of the most influential efforts was the joint BBC and NRK investigation, Death in Ice Valley, which you can listen to on BBC Sounds. Reporters re-examined hotel records. They retraced travel routes. They interviewed surviving witnesses. They collaborated with scientists studying the forensic evidence, and they invited public participation. Listeners and readers from across Europe sent tips. Some believed they recognized her photograph. Others suggested possible family connections. Several promising leads appeared, but none were confirmed. Investigators followed trails through Germany, Belgium, France, and other parts of Europe. Each one ended in uncertainty. The woman remained identified. Normally, identifying an unknown person involves cross-checking several types of records. Missing person reports, dental records, employment histories, medical files, school records, and family testimony. But the Isdal woman sits outside those structures. Her fingerprints did not match international police databases that were available in 1970. Her dental records did not match any accessible files. Her clothing carried no manufacturing labels. Her luggage contained no letters, receipts, or photographs. Even the suitcases themselves offered little traceability. This degree of anonymity is rare. It's not impossible, but it is unusual, especially for someone who appeared educated, travelled internationally, and moved comfortably through hotels and cities. The absence of context became the defining feature of the case. In later years, observers noticed striking similarities between the Isdal woman and another unsolved Norwegian mystery. Jennifer Fairgate. In 1995, a woman using that name checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel. She provided a Belgian address, she listed a companion who never appeared, and she paid in cash. She removed labels from most of her clothing. Several days later, she was found dead in her hotel room. The official ruling was suicide, gunshot wound to the forehead, yet the circumstances raised questions. Gunshot residue patterns were debated. The locked room conditions were puzzling. No passport or personal identification was found. Her clothing labels were missing. Despite extensive investigations, her true identity was never confirmed. The parallels are striking. Two identified women in Norway, both using aliases, both travelling under controlled identities, both leaving almost no personal trace. Both deaths ruled suicide by the authorities, and both cases lingering in uncertainty. There is no evidence linking the two women directly, but the comparison highlights something deeper. People who construct their identities carefully can disappear in ways that conventional investigations struggle to reverse. Unidentified men are sadly common in forensic records, but unidentified women often attract a different kind of attention, partly because of narrative expectations. Women travelling alone across Europe in the 1970s did not fit a single stereotype. Was she a professional, an adventurer, someone escaping a past, someone working in hidden networks? Her independence creates interpretive space. Her secrecy multiplies it. And the absence of family searching publicly adds emotional gravity. Human beings expect connection. Parents, children, friends, somebody somewhere asking questions. In the Isdal case, that absence is almost as mysterious as the death itself. It is possible that someone recognised her but chose not to come forward. Families sometimes remain silent for complicated reasons: shame, political history, personal conflict, or simple uncertainty. A photograph of a burned face reconstructed decades later may not be enough for recognition. Time erodes memory. Records disappear. Borders shift. Especially for someone born around 1930, a generation shaped by war, displacement, and migration across Europe. Her early life may have unfolded in a continent rebuilding itself. Paper trails were not always stable. Names changed, communities scattered. Identity, in that era, could fracture. Isdalen itself continues to draw visitors. Hikers walk the same trails. The valley is quiet, steep, and shadowed. Nothing in the landscape announces what happened there. No monument marks a precise spot. The rocks, the trees, the wind, all remain indifferent. If you stand there long enough, the silence feels almost deliberate. But landscapes do not keep secrets. People do. The valley merely holds the place where the story stops. It's why the case endures. The Isdal Woman story persists because it contains two powerful elements: mystery and restraint. Many unsolved cases accumulate sensational claims over time. But this one, it resists exaggeration. Investigators have never declared espionage. They have never declared murder. They have never claimed a hidden intelligence operation. They have simply acknowledged uncertainty. That restraint leaves space, and space invites speculation. The human mind dislikes unresolved stories. We want a name. We want a motive. We want a final sentence explaining what happened. The Isdal Woman offers none. It is easy to treat the Isdal Woman as a puzzle, a spy story, a Cold War mystery, a forensic challenge. But before all of that, she was simply a person, someone who travelled, someone who chose her clothing carefully, someone who carried cosmetics, notebooks, and umbrellas, someone who spoke languages, navigated cities, and interacted with strangers. A life with routines, conversations, preferences, fears. Those details have vanished. What remains are fragments. A few hotel signatures, a coded travel log, a handful of witness memories, and the valley. For more than 50 years, investigators, journalists, and amateur researchers have tried to rebuild the person behind those fragments. They have narrowed possibilities, mapped regions, sequenced DNA, but a name has not yet emerged. Somewhere in Europe, perhaps in Germany, perhaps in France, perhaps in Belgium, there may still be people whose family tree contains an unexplained absence. A sister who travelled, a cousin who vanished, a daughter who never returned. The connection may exist, but until it is made, the Isdal Woman remains what she has always been: a life interrupted, a story unfinished, and a reminder that identity, something most of us take for granted, can disappear more completely than we expect. This has been The Eclectic, a story not only about death in a Norwegian valley, but about the fragile nature of identity, the stories that we build when answers are missing, and the quiet persistence of a mystery that has refused to fade for more than half a century. Stay curious, stay questioning, and as always, stay eclectic.